Hey, good to see you. All right, jurors are done with orientation, so we can bring them in. All right, take any seat you'd like. All right. Okay, you can be seated. Well, good morning, everyone. First of all, can everybody hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. All right. Thank you. My name is Pete Cahill, and I'm one of the judges of the District Court, and you have been summoned here as potential jurors in the case of State of Minnesota versus Derek Chauvin, which is a criminal case related to the death of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020. A person charged with a crime has a right to a fair trial before an impartial judge and an impartial jury. In order to make sure that the jurors who are selected are impartial, the law provides that the court and the attorneys for the parties may ask questions to all the jurors which must be answered under oath. First of all, thank you for filling out the questionnaire and getting it back to us. It gives us a lot of information to start with, and your contribution to the important and serious matter at hand is best served by continuing to provide full, complete, and honest answers to the questions you're going to be asked today. Those questions will follow up on issues from the questionnaire and possibly other topics. Now, after the questioning is over, the attorneys will have the right to excuse some of you from service on this jury, and I may excuse others of you for what is called cause. In either case, it does not mean that you are not a fair person, and you should not take offense in being excused. Also, I ask that you not take any offense at any question that may be asked. We must pry, to some extent, in order to explore some opinions you might hold and to hear about experiences that you've had that might affect your ability to serve in this case. The defendant, Mr. Chauvin, has been charged with murder in the second degree and manslaughter in the second degree. In the normal course of the trial, charges might be added or subtracted from that, but those are the charges as it stands today. To the charges, the defendant has entered a plea of not guilty, which is a denial of each and every material allegation in the charges. I'm now going to have the participants in the case introduce themselves so that we can ask you if you have any kind of relationship with them, either friendship, acquaintanceship, or a professional relationship. First, for the state.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, everyone. My name is Steve Swisher, and I represent the state of Minnesota.
Good morning. My name is Christina Marinakis, and I'm assisting with the prosecution.
Good morning. I'm Joshua Larson. I'm also representing the state of Minnesota.
Good morning. Erin Eldridge for the state of Minnesota.
Okay, and for the defense.
Good morning. My name is Eric Nelson, along with my assistant Amy Voss. We represent the defendant, Derek Chauvin.
All right, by show of hands, anybody recognize or have a relationship, friendship, acquaintance, professional relationship with anybody who just introduced themselves? All right, no hands. Also, by show of hands, anybody recognize anybody else in the room who they might know? All right. Also, you may see other attorneys for the state who might appear. Those include Matthew Frank, Attorney General Keith Ellison, Jerry Blackwell. Anybody know any of those people or anybody else who works in the Office of the Minnesota Attorney General? Okay, no hands. Thank you. Anyone know anyone who works for Mr. Nelson's law firm or had any dealings with his law firm? Okay, no hands. You were given a list of potential witnesses, and we do ask that if you have not done so, that you review it before your individual questioning, because we will ask you if you know anyone on that list. Now, one of the things the attorneys may not do during jury selection is to instruct you on the law, but I do want you to be aware of some of the concepts that apply in all criminal cases so that you may keep them in mind as you answer the court's and the attorney's questions. And so I will instruct you as follows. First, the charges against the defendant are not evidence, and they create no inference of guilt. No member of the jury should in any way permit himself or herself to be prejudiced against the defendant because a charge has been made or because he has been placed on trial. The defendant is presumed innocent of the charges made against him, and in order for you to find the defendant guilty, the defendant must prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant does not have to prove his innocence. The presumption of innocence remains with the defendant throughout the trial unless and until he has been proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt according to the law and the evidence admitted at trial. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt is such proof as ordinarily prudent men and women would act upon in their most important affairs. A reasonable doubt is a doubt based upon reason and common sense. It does not mean a fanciful or capricious doubt, nor does it mean beyond all possibility of doubt. If you serve on this jury, you and your fellow jurors will be the sole judges of whether a witness is to be believed and of the weight to be given their testimony. Now, there are no hard and fast rules to guide you in this respect, but in determining believability and weight of testimony, jurors may take into consideration the witness's interest or lack of interest in the outcome of the case, their relationship to the parties, their ability and opportunity to know, remember, and relate the facts, their manner, their age and experience, their frankness and sincerity or the lack thereof, the reasonableness or the unreasonableness of their testimony in light of all the other evidence in the case, and any other factors that bear on believability and weight. If on this jury, you should rely on the last analysis upon your own experience, good judgment, and common sense. There are certain things you should not do during jury selection. You are not investigators. You are not to go out and do any looking, and you are not to ask people about this matter. You are not to use the internet to look for information about this case or about the law. Above all, you must not talk to anyone who is involved, either the lawyers or the witnesses or spectators. Do not be offended if the attorneys, parties, or witnesses do not speak to you. They know it would be improper to contact you, except through the normal jury selection process, and they will confine themselves generally to a brief greeting. During the selection process, your family and friends will be curious as to what you are doing. You may tell them you are on a panel of potential jurors in a criminal case, and that is all you should tell them. Since that is all you should tell family and friends, that is all you should tell the general public. So, during the proceedings, please refrain from using Facebook, Twitter, or other social media to announce that you are a potential juror or to comment on this trial. You may access those social media tools, hopefully avoiding any social media news feeds, but please do not publish any information about this case or your thoughts about this case. You do not have to stay away from people and refuse to speak to them. Do whatever you wish, but do not talk about the case, and do not talk at all to anyone involved in it. Now, because of the nature of the charges, this case is receiving media coverage. Do not read about the case in the newspapers or online, and do not listen to news about it on radio or television. This trial, including jury selection, is being televised, but no video of you or any other juror will be taken at any time, now or during trial if you are selected. Also, your name will not be used in the courtroom. You will only be referred to by your random number to protect your privacy. The audio of anything you say will be broadcast unless we need to discuss something deeply personal or extremely sensitive or embarrassing, or something that would likely specifically identify you. In that case, I will specifically order that the audio not be broadcast outside this courtroom. In that case, you will still have to answer questions on the record, but without audio or video broadcast. Now, with the exception of juror number 127, we'll have you wait in the other courtroom until it is your turn to be questioned individually. Feel free to use all the disinfectant wipes, hand sanitizer, everything else. Please keep your mask on and also keep 6 feet apart. We are engaged in all these precautions in the courtroom as well. In fact, I'm going to put my mask on once you come up for individual questioning. So with that, you can go with the deputy except for juror number 127. All right, juror 127, if you could come right up here to the chair that's beside me. And have a seat. All right, good morning.
Good morning.
You are juror 127, correct?
I am.
All right. A couple things before we start. First, I'm going to swear you in because all your answers have to be under oath. So raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I do.
All right. I'm going to have you pull a little closer to the microphone.
Okay.
The microphone doesn't move well, unfortunately.
That's fine.
And just to note that there is plexiglass between us, plexiglass in front of you. The attorneys will be examining you from the lectern, which is a distance away, but also has its own plexiglass. Bottom line is, you can feel free to remove your mask if it would be more comfortable, or you think it's necessary to be able to be heard well.
Okay.
So, but I leave it totally up to you. And even if you take it off, you can put it back on, whatever you want. And so, if you want to go ahead, that's great. The important thing is whether you have a mask on or not. We need you near the microphone so that your voice can be heard. One other thing is to keep in mind, jury selection can kind of like be a conversation, but the court reporter is trying to take everything down, so we need to not do what everyday life we do, finish each other's questions, use mm-hmm or uh-huh. Wait until the question and then answer, and don't talk over each other so that the court reporter can take everything down. And don't worry if it happens, because the lawyers and I are the worst offenders when it comes to talking over each other. So it will happen, just if you could give it your best effort not to. So before I turn over the attorneys, I've got a couple questions of my own. First of all, you filled out the questionnaire, and thank you for taking the time to do that. That's greatly appreciated. Was everything on that questionnaire true?
It was.
All right. Any changes or additions that you can think of right now?
Not at this moment.
Okay. Since it was filled out a few months ago, and a lot of people, when they, in reflection, they go, oh, I should have added this, or that wasn't quite accurate, I need to correct that. Or maybe even that was my opinion at the time, but it's changed. All fine. I want you to feel comfortable giving an answer that's different or additional to anything in your questionnaire. The only thing we ask is that it be obviously complete and honest. So if you're worried, don't worry.
Okay.
Any questions about that?
No.
Okay. The lawyers actually will probably focus you on certain questions, and they'll read the question and your answer, not to be confrontational, but to refresh your memory about what the answer was that you gave. Because I'm guessing you don't remember every answer you gave after a couple months.
I don't.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, so don't worry, they will refresh your recollection on that. You were not supposed to read any articles or pay attention to any media about this case or any related cases. But again, we understand that it's been a few months, and given the amount of news coverage, a lot of jurors have inadvertently been exposed to some new information about the case or related cases. Has that happened with you? Have you been seeing like a headline or a blurb?
I'm not a reader.
Okay.
I don't enjoy reading. I've always struggled reading, so
Okay.
I don't read the newspapers.
Okay.
You know, for the most part, and I'm not a Facebook person. I have no desire to be on Facebook or any of these other medias. I like having my own life, and I guess I kind of stay away from a lot of the social things out there anymore.
Okay.
So,
Any TV or radio news that maybe you got exposed to some information?
through the years of driving a truck and being the media trying to influence us all the time, I am so put off with it. I really don't even watch the news anymore,
Okay.
to be honest. I'll catch the weather is about my highlight, and I try to do that by the tail end of the news, whatever channel it's on, is
Okay.
about it. The news bothers me.
Okay.
So,
So like halfway through the news, you turn on the weather, maybe the sports at the end, and
right.
okay. If you think of anything that you were exposed to, whether it's this case or related cases, pre-trial matters, any of the parties, feel free to volunteer that because we'd like to know.
Okay.
It sounds like you've been able to avoid a lot of that successfully. But no matter what you know about this case, and everybody comes in here knowing about the case because before you were a potential juror, there was a lot of coverage on this. The point is, you have to put everything aside when you sit as a juror. Anything you've heard, any opinions you form, you have to put all that aside and just decide the case based on the evidence you hear in the courtroom and applying the law as I give it to you. Do you think you could do that?
I can do that.
In doing so, do you feel yourself leaning one way or the other, or do you feel like you're pretty impartial?
To be honest, I think I'm very impartial, and through the time of all of this, it's kept me awake and thinking about things.
Okay.
And it comes down to a few questions, I believe. Why did it happen? What happened? What is the truth?
Okay. And when you're sitting in those chairs, you're going to hear a lot of evidence about the incident itself. And there are certain things that I'll tell you that must be proven, and your decision will be whether they are or not. And in evaluating that evidence, you don't feel pulled one way or the other?
The truth and the evidence should stand on itself, I guess.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Did you recognize any of the witnesses on that list?
I did not.
All right. And we have a trial estimate of 4 weeks starting this coming Monday. Can you make that work with your personal and professional life?
I can.
Okay. All right. Before I turn it over to Mr. Nelson, any questions for me?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Then as juror number 127, Mr. Nelson, you may inquire.
I am a little nervous, though.
Everybody is. The only people who aren't are those of us who kind of live in the courtroom, like the lawyers and myself. So, but you're doing great.
Yeah, I may be a little nervous too, so. Good morning, sir. Thank you for being here, and thank you for taking the time to write your responses in the questionnaire, okay? I am going to ask you a series of kind of just general questions first to get to know you a little bit better, and then I'm going to follow up with some questions about your responses to the questionnaire. Would that be okay?
That'd be fine.
All right. And again, no one's trying to trick you. If there's a question that is read, we'll read you the question, we'll read you exactly what you wrote, and we may ask you some follow-ups, okay?
Yes.
All right. So if you and I were to meet under a different circumstance, a party, a social event, whatever it may be, and we have our first conversation, what are a couple things I'm going to learn about you during that conversation?
Probably what I do for a living.
Okay. I understand you're a truck driver?
I was, but I've changed professions due to personal life and went back to school at 50 and became, through an apprentice program, 5-year apprentice program as a Minneapolis pipe fitter.
Okay.
So,
And again, don't want to name the business or identify you, but so you actually made a pretty significant life change
yes,
at 50.
yes,
Okay. You obviously had heard about this case before coming in and learning you were a potential juror. Is that correct?
yes.
When you got the packet of information and you learned that you were a prospective juror in this case, how did that make you feel?
I couldn't believe it.
Why?
I just never in my life ever pictured being on a jury, I guess,
Okay.
let alone this case.
Right. It's widely reported about. It's a high-profile type of a situation.
Yes.
Okay. Did you have any concerns for your personal safety, your physical safety, your family safety, COVID, any of those types of things?
It does concern me after viewing Lake Street and all of that, and you know what happened, post what happened. It's concerning. You know, I don't know what either side's capable of anymore, and I don't want to be a part of either of them. I just try to be a good person, I guess.
So I guess the question is can you set your concerns aside and judge this case impartially based on the evidence, or would your concerns be so great that you would have a tendency to lean one way or the other?
I'll try to be as fair as I can. I believe it's the best way to go through life. We all make mistakes. And again, what is the truth? You know, I can't judge anything. I don't trust the media. So whatever comes out here, I'll have to rely on.
Okay. And I guess, you know, again, your concerns, there's two potential verdicts at the end of this case, right?
Yes.
And the question becomes whether you would allow your fear of the aftermath of a verdict to influence how you choose to vote.
I don't want to be afraid to make the right choice. No matter what either side is trying outside the courtroom is trying to push. It's not about them. It's about a person's life right now.
Okay.
So,
All right. When you came to the court this morning and you saw sort of the fortifications and things of that nature, how did that make you feel?
it made me feel good. A lot of the security's fine. I'm fine with that. Again, after what happened on Lake Street and all of that, it's welcomed.
Okay.
Does not bother me.
When you learned that this morning that we're trying to protect jurors' anonymity, how did that make you feel?
It makes me feel good.
Okay. And at some point, we don't know when or in how long, but at a point that when the judge determines that it is safe to do so, you understand your name may be released publicly.
I understood that.
Okay. And how does that make you feel?
I'll be fine.
Okay. In your personal or professional life, can you think of a circumstance where you had to resolve a dispute or a conflict between two people?
Not right offhand. As far as working the construction right now, everybody seems to just kind of go and do their own, whatever their task or job is. As far as driving a truck, I might be in and out of a place so quickly you're never going to encounter a lot of people without much problem. And I was an over-the-road truck driver, so you're on your own.
Right.
So
Okay. Well, let's put it this way. So you understand that your task as a juror would be to resolve a dispute at a pretty grand scale, the dispute between the state and Mr. Chauvin, right?
yes.
And the process involves 12 people talking about and trying to analyze the evidence as it's presented in court, right? And disputes may emerge between jurors. Do you understand that?
Yes.
So putting yourself in that position, let's assume you're in the jury room and there are two sort of different opinions about how to interpret the evidence or what the law means, and you're in the middle of that. How would you picture yourself trying to resolve that dispute or conflict between those two sides?
Again, what is the law? What are we being directed to do? Staying focused in what we're being asked to do, I guess, and talk with people. We're all different. We all got different points of view. And just hear people out and try to be fair
Okay.
And at the same time, I have my own opinion.
Right.
So,
And that's what's going to be kind of maybe you're anticipating my follow-up, which is, do you think the analysis of how to resolve conflict changes if you have a horse in the race, so to speak, if you have a strong opinion? And how does it change in that regard?
Again, I don't have a horse in the race here, but we all have our opinions. I guess I don't quite know how to answer that. I just try to be fair.
Okay. Well, I guess the question is, are you willing to listen to other jurors and potentially change your mind?
Yes, yes.
But at the same time, if you have a very firm belief, are you willing to kind of stand your ground and take your position?
Yes, I am.
And you understand that the two are not mutually exclusive, right? I mean,
Sure.
ultimately, it requires a unanimous decision.
Yes.
So are you the type of person who would agree with something that you disagree with simply for the purposes of building, of coming to a conclusion?
If I feel strongly enough about something, I will probably stand pretty firm.
All right, fair enough. How do you, in your opinion, you may hear testimony from two witnesses. How do you determine which of those two people may or may not be telling the truth about a situation?
It's a hard question to answer.
Right.
Through my life's experiences of being around the country and dealing with all sorts of people, I think I have a pretty strong gut feeling about people when they're lying to me or telling me the truth, and what happened versus a story. I've encountered too many people, even numerous times, different places in the country, but in that same place, that have come up to me looking for money with the same story, years in between. It can't be the same story every time,
Okay.
so to speak.
Sure. Do you think that two people can observe a situation standing right next to each other? They're watching the same incident, and they may perceive it differently than the others? And it doesn't mean that they're lying, it's just a difference of perception.
Yes.
What types of factors do you think influence a person's perception of an event?
Probably fear, for one. Being startled, surprised.
Okay. So sort of an emotional response to what they're seeing?
Yes.
Do you think that a person's training, education, or experience may influence how they see an event?
Yes.
Okay. How so?
Say a doctor might view an accident different than a construction worker. They're probably seeing what needs to be done to help. We're still trying to figure out what is the best thing to do.
Okay. Good. Can you think of a circumstance in your life where you were 100% confident that you were right, only to later learn you were wrong?
As far as an actual incident, no, but yes, I can say I have done that.
Sure. How do you respond? I mean, I know it's kind of, sometimes it's a real small little thing, right? Sometimes it's bigger, but when you're proven wrong, how do you respond to that?
If I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
Okay.
And just say I'm on the job and I'm doing something that I thought was right, but then it turned out to be wrong. Well, I'm the one who has to own up for that. And I don't see it as necessarily doing something wrong, but it's a learning experience. It's something you can build from and perhaps not do again.
Okay, good. Now, ultimately, again, your role as a juror is to analyze the evidence as it's presented in court, and at the end of the case, the judge will give you some questions of law that you have to resolve, right? He'll give you the law you have to apply to the case. You may read that law and you may think this is wrong, or you may think this law needs to be changed. Can you apply the law as the judge gives it to you, even if you think it's wrong or should be changed?
Yes.
So I'm sorry, I'm going to just follow up on a few questions based on your response, your responses to the questionnaire. Again, you had obviously heard about this incident before filling this out, and the questionnaire asks you some questions about what you remember hearing, what you had seen, etc. There are references, and I think you refer to it as the video all the world saw of the policeman holding him down, right?
Correct.
So there have been several videos that have been released publicly, including there was a bystander video, there were some body-worn cameras that were released, and there were some neighborhood or business surveillance cameras that have made it into the public. Which of those videos are you referring to when you say you've seen videos?
Well, where you see the defendant as you're viewing the car from the front end there, and George Floyd is on the ground on the other side of the car. I believe you only really see his head for the most part. And
so the bystander video is what you would assume that to be?
I guess that would be the video, yes.
Okay. And you said you've seen that maybe 2 to 3 times?
I've seen it 2 to 3 times, maybe a few times more. It's nothing that I want to sit and view, or any other tragedy type of thing. It's just, it happened. I've saw it. I don't need to see it multiple times. I mean, just for viewing purposes, I guess.
Right. Well, let me ask you a couple of follow-ups. When you saw that video, did you see it like on the news? Did you see it like little clips, or did you go and watch a longer length video?
It was on the news.
Okay. So a 30-second clip, a minute-long clip maybe?
I don't even know if it was that long. You get maybe 20 seconds or something, whatever the news offers you.
But you didn't like then go back and try to look at a longer length video?
No, I did not.
Okay. You know, it's very possible that those videos or other videos of this incident will be admitted into court and maybe played multiple times with multiple witnesses. Is that something that you can handle?
Yes.
Okay. You were asked a couple of questions about your general impression of both the defendant, Mr. Chauvin, as well as George Floyd. With respect to Mr. Chauvin, you wrote, you had a neutral general impression, and you wrote, I don't know the whole story and truth. Can you explain what you mean by that? And
I don't know him personally. I don't know how he's lived his life. I don't believe, contrary to what the news might say, or try to influence people. I don't think a policeman wakes up in the morning to have a tragedy happen during the day. I believe it's a hard job. For the most part, I want to say very good people.
okay. Now, you had a somewhat negative view of Mr. Floyd, and you didn't explain why. So can you explain why you had a somewhat negative view of Mr. Floyd?
Well, if I was, here again, I don't know this person personally. Obviously, something triggered what happened that day. From the way it sounded, it started in that convenience store and it led outside. Again, thinking about things, if I struggled for who knows how long, what would happen to me? You know? So why is somebody resisting when all you have to do, we could have done, is just went with them? If there isn't a problem, you have nothing to worry about.
Okay. But again, do you believe that you need to get more information about both sides of this story?
Definitely.
Okay. And again, the question ultimately is we recognize that people have been exposed to this case quite extensively. And ultimately the question becomes, whatever you think you knew, whatever opinions you had formed, can you set those opinions aside and judge this case exclusively on the evidence as it's presented in court?
I'll try to do the best I can.
So unfortunately, I have to get you to answer yes or no to
Yes.
that. Okay. You were asked if you had talked with your friends, family, or coworkers about this case, or if you discussed it on social media. I think the social media is pretty clear. You don't participate in social media?
I do not.
Okay. And so you've had some conversations, and you wrote, it is tragic when anyone dies, right?
Yes.
You were asked a question, do you believe your community has been negatively or positively affected by any of the events that have taken place in the Twin Cities area since Mr. Floyd's death? And you wrote negatively.
Yes.
Why do you think that?
Because now everybody's running out to Home Depot and Menards and buying security cameras, and even we had a shooting in our alley a month ago where somebody drove by and shot through the garage, someone's garage. So it's concerning.
So it's like the uptick in crime?
Yes, and the whole defund the police thing to me is lunacy.
Okay. And you live in the Minneapolis proper, right?
South Minneapolis.
Okay. Now, there's a difference, obviously, between, or would you agree that there is a difference between protesting and rioting?
Yes.
And how would you define the difference between protesting and rioting?
I think Martin Luther King and the protests back then were peaceful. That's a protest. A riot is not a protest. Burning buildings down is not a protest. Just taking someone's livelihood away is not a protest.
Okay. Do you think that was any positive protesting that came about after this?
I don't think so.
Okay. You were asked, or there was a page in the questionnaire where you were asked for to rank your opinion on some kind of broad statements from strongly agree to strongly disagree. And you may not remember those statements or what you wrote, but I wanted to ask you a few follow-ups on those. There is a question that reads, police in this country treat whites and blacks equally, and you somewhat agreed with that. Do you have a personal experience, or do you have friends who've told you, like, why do you somewhat agree with the notion that blacks and whites are treated equally?
I guess that's the way I view it. I don't exactly know what a policeman deals with or thinks each day, but as doing their job, I don't think they want to just single out one race of people over another. It's something has happened. They're either pulled over, stopped at a whatever store or something. Maybe they were shoplifting. It's not the color of a person's, it's their actions. So I don't here again, things that are on the news, I've heard that there's more white people that get apprehended or get in trouble than black people, but it's more politicized anymore with black people.
Okay. You were asked, or the statement reads, police in my community make me feel safe, and you strongly agreed with that.
They do. I think police are great and needed.
Okay.
I mean, what is this? I shouldn't say it like this. It's not the Old West, you know.
Right. Okay. Well, let me ask you, along that line, you're going to hear testimony from police officers in this case, and you're going to hear testimony from citizens in this case, right? So if you hear testimony from a police officer, are you going to automatically give that testimony more credibility and believability simply by virtue of the fact that they're a police officer?
Yes, I probably would.
Okay. So you're saying you can't judge a person's testimony equally regardless of what they do for a living?
No, I didn't. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just their life's experience in cases and dealing with the public is going to be what it is.
Okay. So I guess the question becomes is every witness should be analyzed on its own.
Yes.
Can you do that?
Yes.
And again, if you have, if you have a police officer and a citizen witnessing the same incident, can you treat those testimonies the same? Or would you automatically believe the police officer more than the citizen?
As long as the truth is there, I guess. I could, either person.
Okay. Now, you were asked a series of questions about both Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter. With respect to Black Lives Matter, you wrote that you had a somewhat unfavorable opinion, and you wrote All Lives Matter. Why do you have a somewhat unfavorable opinion of Black Lives Matter?
I think they're a political entity anymore for the left.
Okay.
Everybody's life matters. It shouldn't be just one race. If these people were so benevolent, they could go to Chicago.
Okay. And you have a very favorable opinion of Blue Lives Matter, correct?
Yes,
And you wrote, they risk their lives every day to make others safe.
they do.
So again, I mean, it's the same thing. Both sides have a right to a fair trial, right?
Yes.
The defendant as well as the state of Minnesota.
Yes.
And so we all come to this with our own opinions, our own beliefs, our own biases. And your role as a juror is to be neutral, fair, and impartial. Can you set aside, I mean, you have strong opinions, right, which are perfectly fine to have. Can you set aside those opinions and judge this case exclusively on the evidence as it's presented in court?
Yes.
You have a couple of relatives who are nurses and some friends who work in healthcare.
Yes.
Ultimately, there may be medical evidence that comes into play in this case. And the question is, would you call your relatives, would you call your friends and say, hey, these doctors, these nurses, this is what they're saying. Is that correct?
I wouldn't call them.
Okay. You were asked whether you believe that the criminal justice system works, why or why not, and you wrote, I'm not exactly certain anymore. Why?
I think it all stemmed from all the riots and everything that a lot of people that, and here again, who knows who did all the looting and burning. It seems like they got off scot-free, and nobody's been held accountable.
So you have some,
At least to my understanding.
okay. And it's fair to say you don't know about every single case that comes through the court system.
No, I do not.
You were asked if you want to serve as a juror in this case, and you checked the box yes, and you wrote, regardless of the case, it is your civil duty as an American citizen. Do you stand by that?
I do.
Okay. And again, in the interests of fairness to everyone, right? Can you set aside your personal opinions? Can you judge this case on the evidence and as it's presented in court?
I can.
Your Honor, if I may have a moment. pass for cause, Your Honor.
Mr. Slusher. Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Wanting to ask you some follow-up questions in terms of some of your views on the media. You voiced some strong opinions indicating that you believe that the media is trying to influence you.
Yes.
Can you please describe what you mean by that?
They'll take a little bit grain of something and try to turn it into whatever narrative that they want you to believe.
And is there any particular media outlet? You mentioned the radio, that you listen to the radio a lot as an over-the-road trucker. Is there any particular media outlet that you felt was doing that more than another media outlet?
You can go on either side. You could go from Fox News to CNN. They both have their agenda and the way they want to push their narrative.
And I guess, you know, you indicated that you believe that they were trying to influence you to the point that you weren't even interested in watching or listening anymore. Is that right?
It is, and it's not just this case. It's politics. It's enough to make your head spin or explode practically, because I'm tired of listening to one side or the other condemning the other.
We just got done with a pretty contentious election cycle.
We did.
Was that, I guess, in your mind as you were answering that question, thinking about everything that was going on in the news over the last year or so?
It is, and it happens every presidential cycle. It builds and builds and builds, from what I've noticed over the years.
Now, you did voice some strong opinions supportive of police officers. Fair?
Yes.
And at one point, you indicated that you believed that you would tend to believe a police officer more than another witness, and then it sounded like you were willing to kind of back off of that position a little bit. Is that right?
If a person was there at a scene before a police officer was there, then obviously they have a first-hand account of something. On the other hand, police officers, I believe, are trained to gather evidence and try to find out what's happened.
And I guess that's the point of my question. You know, in your own words, speaking for yourself, tell me why you initially answered that you would tend to believe a police officer more than another witness. What would make you think that?
I guess I hope they're unbiased and fair.
Anything else that, and it sounds like you believe they would be unbiased and fair.
Yes.
Okay. Anything beyond your belief that an officer would tend to be unbiased and fair? Anything beyond that that would lead you to believe that you could trust their word more than another witness?
I can't answer, I guess. I guess I just believe in the police being fair.
And you initially, when asked the question from counsel, how do you tell if somebody's lying, you said it's a kind of a gut thing.
Yes.
And so do you believe in your gut that a police officer would tend to be unbiased and fair?
I do.
And that might not be a feeling that you have with any other witness, like a bystander or someone you don't know.
It's hard to say what they're trying to make you believe. I've been living my life on the road for over 20 years prior to getting into the field that I'm in now. I've encountered a lot of people and a lot of stories. So you have to discern after what is the truth? What are they looking for? What are they trying to get at? So it's not hard to tell with some of these people out there in the world.
You were sharing a scenario where someone has told you the same kind of hard luck story as a different person, but a year apart.
Actually, it was the same person. It happened 3 different times over the period of 3 years. Gary, Indiana, at the truck stop. This lady would come up. She's left her money in her car. She ran out of gas. Boyfriend got the car, and she's trying to get home. Finally, I confronted her on the 3rd time, and she says, "Oh, that must have been my sister." It's like, no. I remember you, and I remember your story. I didn't say that to her, but that's what I was feeling.
Sure.
So I helped her out the first 2 times, but the 3rd time was enough is enough.
Understood. And you were talking about bystanders versus police, and that a bystander, if like they saw something before the police officer got there, you might tend to believe the bystander. Right?
Yes.
Let's say it's a situation where you have a bystander and a police officer, and they're seeing the same thing. Let's say it's a traffic light. The bystander says to you, the light was red. The police officer, who's standing right next to the bystander, and so they would have seen the same thing at the same time, says, no, the light was green. Would you tend to believe one over the other?
I think I would. I would go with the policeman.
Right, and that's because they are a policeman, and you think that they are generally unbiased and fair.
I think they're observing something also. They're a witness too. Then they probably know the traffic laws better than we do, though we all should if we drive a car.
You also answered a question on the questionnaire. There was a question posed to you, and it said, because law enforcement officers have such dangerous jobs, it is not right to second guess decisions that they make while they're on duty. And you somewhat agreed with that statement. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you somewhat agree with that statement?
They got a dangerous job. Things are happening in split seconds, I would have to assume, with their job. And they make decisions, judgments, in fractions of seconds to resolve things, I guess. Say somebody was robbing a store and they've got a gun. It's a very dangerous situation. You don't have minutes to decide things, in my opinion. They would not have. And you'll have to deal with it post haste.
Do you believe that it's fair that their decisions get reviewed, even if made under pressure and in a short period of time?
No.
All right. One moment, Your Honor. Your Honor, may we have a sidebar?
We're just gonna talk a little bit, so.
Okay, get right back to you. Juror 127? I'm going to excuse you from this panel. In fact, you're freed from all jury service. We're not going to call you up on a different case to potentially serve. Thank you for taking the time to visit with us today, but also all the information you gave. We truly appreciate it. All right?
Thank you.
And you can go with the deputy. He'll take some paperwork from you.
Thank you.
You bet.
Have a good day.
You too. All right, the state made a motion challenging for cause on the grounds that the potential juror exhibited bias, which would prevent him from being fair and impartial. The defense opposed that, noting that he stated he could be fair and impartial. The court granted the challenge for cause. I think he was very honest. I think he was not only honest but forthcoming about his opinions and that. But I think they do reveal, considering the totality of the circumstances and not merely his statement that he could be fair and impartial, that it would be difficult for him to do so, and so the cause was granted. With regard to, I think it was juror 121, that was defense exercise peremptory, made a motion for cause, cited the McKinley case. I've had a chance to read that overnight, and I'm going to reinstate the defendant's peremptory and list that as a cause challenge. And so, Mr. Nelson, you have one back. Thank you for the citation to McKinley. It was good to review that. All right, next juror, 129. Morning, come on up. Have a seat. You are juror number 129, correct?
That's correct.
All right. First thing, I'm going to swear you in because all your answers have to be under oath, so if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I do.
All right. You have plexiglass in front of you, and we have it between us. The lawyers will be examining you from pretty far distance away, but they also have plexiglass. My point is, if you would like to remove your mask, either for comfort or just because you think you can speak more clearly, feel free to do so. But if you want to keep it on, we're fine with that too. In either case, mask or no mask, I'm going to ask that you pull close to the microphone so that we can hear you. Perfect. When you are answering questions, it's very common for jury selection to become like a conversation.
Okay.
But our typical way we operate in everyday life is we talk over each other, we interrupt each other. If it would be at all possible, if you could use your best efforts not to do that, because the court reporter is taking everything down, and it's good if people can not talk over each other.
Okay.
All right? And having said that, I'll tell you that I tend to be the worst offender on that. So, first of all, a couple questions for you before I turn you over to the attorneys. You filled out a questionnaire. Thank you for doing so. You gave us a lot of good information to start with. Was everything true on that questionnaire?
I believe so.
Okay, and it's been a few months.
Yeah.
In the meantime, you've had a couple months to reflect. As you sit here right now, can you think of anything specific that you thought, I should have put this down, or what I put down wasn't quite accurate, I got to change that? Or maybe my opinions have changed. Anything that comes to mind?
I don't think so.
Okay, it more often comes to mind when lawyers are actually asking you specific questions.
Yeah.
They'll point to your question, they'll read the question and the answer, not to be confrontational, but more to refresh your memory about what you said.
Correct.
So, if you feel like you have to give a different answer than what's in your questionnaire, don't worry about it. I want you to feel comfortable doing that because we understand things change, and sometimes you remember things you didn't remember at the time. Okay? Now, the questionnaire did advise you not to read any articles, don't follow any media about this, but we understand with the passage of time and the great deal of media coverage that you might have been exposed inadvertently to some type of coverage, you know, a headline, a blurb on the news, anything that you recall being exposed to since when you filled out the questionnaire until today.
Well, I've heard some stuff from other people, you know, that they'll just in passing say something, you know. I
Okay.
try to stay away from all of it, so.
Well, we put you in a real tough spot because we said don't tell anybody you're a potential juror, so you can't exactly go, don't
Yeah.
talk to me. It would appear odd. So we put you in a tough spot. But what substance do you recall about the conversation that might have added to your knowledge about the case, accurate or inaccurate?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what all of I've heard since that, but
Okay.
I don't think anything that would
Okay.
cause me to change any of my questions or anything.
Yeah, and I don't really, I'm not looking for other people's opinions, but maybe substance. Like, did you hear anything about any pretrial matters in this case or about related civil cases in the, that you actually got some information as opposed to an opinion?
Well, just the settlement for the family.
Okay,
That
and tell-
I heard about that. But,
Yeah, and tell me what you remember from what you heard.
well, my neighbor was over at our house, and he just said that the settlement, the family got $27 million.
Okay. What was your reaction to that?
I wasn't very happy about that.
Okay. And how so?
I
Or for what reason?
I don't know how to explain, but
Oh, that's okay.
I'm not sure how to explain what
Okay.
I just wasn't very happy about it. That's just.
Okay. The point that I need to make about that, for example, thanks for bringing that up, because that's exactly the kind of thing we're looking for, is if you're exposed to it, even though it's not part of this case. In fact, it won't be a part of this
Right,
case.
Exactly.
It is a separate case, different laws, different decisions, everything is different about that case, and so it won't be a part of this case.
Yeah.
But since it's related, can you put it aside, not even
Oh, yeah.
put that into your consideration here?
Yeah, it wouldn't be part of my consideration anyway, so.
Okay. For example, we asked you, this is question number 10, in a very wordy manner, can you be fair and impartial? And you answered yes. Hearing about that settlement, did that move you a little bit one way or the other?
No.
Okay.
No.
Pretty much kept you where you're at.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. For all the information, like maybe if you become aware of something else you may have heard about, can you put all of what you've heard aside, before a questionnaire, after a questionnaire, what you know about this case, some of which might be accurate, some of which might not be? Can you just put it all aside and any opinions you may have formed about this case and decide the case just on the evidence you hear in court and on the instructions that I give you?
I think I can. I'm not positive, but I think I can.
Okay. I'm going to press you a little bit because we
Okay.
do need to get kind of a one or the other. You think you can. Tell me what might move you towards, here's why I think I can, or here's why I think I might not be able to. Like it,
Being impartial, you mean?
yeah, I mean, for example, do you come in with strong feelings, about police officers one way or the other, or about what you did see on the media that would kind of bring, even though you try and put it aside, just knowing yourself, and it's perfectly fine if that's the case. You can put it aside or you can't. It's pretty much, we're relying on you knowing yourself
Yeah.
and how well you're able to kind of put things aside. And if you can, great. If you can't, that's also fine too. It just means this might not be the case for you. But so tell me a little bit about that, if you could kind of follow up on what I was just saying.
I guess I would. I believe in the police, and I believe that, things happen, and I would probably be more swayed for police officers. So
Okay. Now, the defendant is
But
presumed
I-
innocent. You should do that. But you think,
yeah.
maybe just your life experience and that it might, if you're right in the middle, maybe just your life experience would push you towards hoping for one verdict or another.
Well, I don't think it. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want you to know that everybody comes in with different life history. There are certain cases I probably should not sit on as a judge, maybe because of my experience in life. But the jurors, we just say, okay, based on my life experience, I can't or can sit on this jury. And if you had to give me a yes or no, what would it be? Is this the case you should sit on? And that's basically, can you be impartial,
Yes.
not favor one side or the other?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. Here's an easier question. Did you recognize any of the witnesses on the witness list?
No, I did not.
All right. This case is supposed to be about 4 weeks in length starting on Monday. You did indicate a concern. You have kids, not uncommon among our jurors, but again, your situation. Could you make it work despite having some kids at home?
Yes, I'm sure we could figure it out.
Okay. All right. Unless you have any questions for me, I'm going to turn you over to Mr. Nelson. Any questions?
I don't think so.
All right.
Mr. Nelson has the juror
29.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here this morning. Thank you for your patience and for filling out the questionnaire.
And
I'd like to ask you a series of questions first that just kind of get to know you and your thinking a little bit, and then I'll ask you some follow-ups on your questionnaire, okay? Would that be all right with you?
yes,
All right. I know that this is an incredibly awkward and unusual circumstance, and no one's trying to trick you or call into question your fairness, okay?
okay,
So let's assume you and I were to have met in a different circumstance, some social gathering, a party, whatever. We have our first conversation. What are a couple things that I'm going to learn about you during that conversation?
I have 3 kids. It's pretty much everything. I don't know.
3 kids takes up a
Possibly.
lot of time, right?
Yeah. I'm not sure.
Okay. And that's fine. I mean, 3 kids takes up, like I said, a lot of time. And there, I understand kind of in the adolescent age and a little younger.
Yes, correct.
So their lives are basically your lives, right?
Yeah.
So when you obviously had heard about this case before filling out this questionnaire.
Correct.
When you got the questionnaire, however, and you learned you were a potential juror in this case, how did that make you feel?
Very nervous.
Why?
At the possibility of I'm a very shy person anyway, so it just is a little difficult
Okay.
for me to, and I didn't want to be on this case, so.
Okay. Why didn't you want to be on this case?
I fear for my the safety of my family.
Okay. So let's talk about that a little bit. Do you think that your concerns over your family's safety would be such that it would influence the ultimate decision as to guilty or not guilty?
No.
When you say you're concerned for your family, is it because you don't want to be publicly identified? What were the concerns for your family's safety?
Yeah, I've just been, I don't know, I just don't want anybody to know, but
So, I know that you had.
Awesome. Excuse me.
Sorry, just a few more questions. Well, we go for it. Actually, a few more, but
So, it's fair to say you're pretty nervous today,
yes, I'm very nervous.
and that's completely and totally understandable, right? And again, we're trying to protect your anonymity as best we possibly can.
Yes.
So, I know that you made several references in your questionnaire about your concerns about your family and being away from your family. And I know you said you could make it work, but ultimately the question is, would it be or cause your family an undue hardship for you to be a juror in this case for a month?
I think we would be able to make it, but it would actually probably be good for my daughter.
Okay.
But to get a little bit more independence, but I don't know, with them just going back to school, it's tough too. So
Okay. When you got to the government center today and you saw the fortifications and the army and things, did that help you feel safer?
well, it helps me feel safer here, but
Right.
not out there.
Right, and that's what we're really concerned about. I mean, and I'm concerned too for you. I just need to be able to know that you would not allow those fears or concerns to influence how you may look at the evidence in this case or influence your ultimate verdict.
I do not think it would affect how I look at the case and all that.
Okay, all right. When you learned this morning that we're trying to protect your anonymity as best we can, did that make you feel better?
Well, yeah, but that's still not going to help after everything goes public.
Right.
At
We don't
the
know
end
when
of it.
that will be. There could be some time. It would not be until the judge determined it to be safe. Do you understand that?
Okay.
Does that make you feel better?
Well, yeah.
Okay. So, Your Honor, if we could have a sidebar.
Juror number 129. I'm going to release you from this jury. And you don't have to worry about being called up on other juries because your jury service is ended completely. Unless we, 4 years from now or so, send you a summons, but until then, you are free to go.
Okay, thank you very much.
And the deputy will take some paperwork from you. All right. Do you want to start on another juror, or should we take our break right now? Let's take a little more till 1:45. All right. We'll reconvene at 10:45. I have to discuss some camera issues as well. Thank you. No. juror's on his way. All right, come up, have a seat. And you are juror 130, is that correct?
Yep.
All right. First of all, I'm going to swear you in because all your answers have to be under oath. So if you could raise your right hand. You swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror.
I do.
All right, thank you. Okay, we have plexiglass between us, and I'm going to keep my mask on. Plexiglass in front of you, plexiglass in front of the lectern where the lawyers are going to be asking you questions, which is a distance away. My conclusion of all that is, if you want to remove your mask for comfort or to be able to be heard more clearly, feel free to do so.
Okay.
If you want to leave it on, also fine. I'll pretty much leave it to you.
Okay.
In either case, mask or no mask, need you kind of near the microphone so that we can hear everything you say.
All right.
And so far, it seems to be just fine. So, but just keep that in mind. Well, first of all, before I turn it over to the attorneys, a couple questions I have. First of all, you filled out a questionnaire, and thank you for taking the time to do that. Gave us a lot of good information to start with. Is everything true on that questionnaire?
Yes.
Anything that you wanted to change or add to what was on the questionnaire?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. It usually comes up when the lawyers are asking you questions from the questionnaire, and they will usually read the question and also read your answer, not to be confrontational, but just to refresh your memory about what your answer was.
Okay.
And if there is something additional or different, feel free to volunteer that.
All right.
The bottom line is I want you to feel comfortable giving an answer that is different from what's in the questionnaire. Because we understand with the passage of time you might have thought of other things you should have included, or that something was not accurate, or maybe even your opinions have evolved. So it's all right to be different than what's in the questionnaire.
Okay.
Okay? Also, you're not supposed to read any articles or any media, pay any attention to the news about this case or any related cases. But we understand with the passage of a few months, inadvertently you might be exposed to something. Either, a quick blurb on the TV news, or a headline, or maybe even talking to a friend who tells you something. And since we told you don't tell anybody you're a potential juror, you can't exactly stop them.
Yeah.
So, anything like that that you've been inadvertently exposed to? About this case, related cases, anything?
The only thing I heard was about, I had some coworkers talking about the settlement with the city.
Okay.
I tried to avoid the conversation. I didn't speak to them about it, but I heard some details about it. Not sure everything that happened, but I did hear some banter about that. That's about
Okay. Did you hear any amounts or anything like that?
No.
Okay. Did you hear their opinions about the amounts?
I don't think so. I think they were
Okay.
just kind of talking about it in general.
So as far as the substance of what you may have learned about this case or the related civil case, basically that there was a settlement, nothing more than that, or was there a little more detail than that?
I just heard that the city had come to a settlement with the family of George Floyd. That's
Okay.
about all I heard.
All right. And how do you think that's going to affect you as being a juror in this case?
I don't think it will really affect me. I don't know much about what happened, but
Right.
yeah, I don't think it will really affect me. I didn't hear enough details really.
Okay. Well, let me put it this way. The settlement is not a part of this case. You won't hear evidence about it because it's not a part of this case. Separate case, separate parties, separate legal issues, separate decisions by the city, who's not a party to this case. So it won't be in evidence. But can you put aside what you heard about that there was a settlement?
Yeah.
All right. And one of our questions, number 10 in part 1, asks in a very long, wordy way, my fault, can you be fair and impartial? And you said yes. Do you still feel, based on everything you may have heard, that your answer would still be yes?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. little hesitation, or are you just kind of thinking to make sure?
I'm just kind of thinking, it was a while ago. So, but
Right.
I do feel the same, I would say.
Okay. And specifically with regard to the hearing about the settlement, is that kind of the needle? You're at fair and impartial right in the middle. Does that move it one way or the other?
It definitely wouldn't. It would move it probably more towards impartial, I would think. Like I said, I don't know exactly what the settlement's all about.
Right.
At first thought, I thought that it had something to do with this case. I wasn't really aware that it wasn't.
Okay.
But yeah, I guess it wouldn't move the needle too dramatically either way.
Either way. Okay. Generally, what you've heard about the case, before the questionnaire, after the questionnaire, as a jury, you have to put all that aside, disregard it, and any opinions you may have about the case, about the facts of the case. Some people have seen so much or have opinions so entrenched that they don't feel they can do that and just decide the case on the facts, the evidence that you hear in court, and the law that I give you. Where are you on that? Do you think you can?
The video and everything that I saw over the summer definitely did affect me in a lot of ways. I was very active in what went on after that.
Okay.
And it definitely did affect me in a way that I can't easily put aside.
Okay.
I know that's kind of goes against being fair and impartial, but
Well, actually, let me change the question a little bit.
Okay.
Every juror tries to be fair and impartial. I've never met one in my 14 years on the bench who does not try to be fair and impartial. But we have to push you and say, based on what you know about this case and that, can you, yes or no, be fair and impartial? And it's not a failure if you say yes, it's not a failure if you say no. It's just what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of given that, as opposed to can you try, ultimately, knowing yourself, can you be?
I would give it my best. I would be probably leaning more towards lying if I said that I could for sure be fair and impartial.
Okay.
Like I said, everything that I saw over the summer, it really did affect me, and I'm not 100% sure on that. I could try, I guess is what I'm saying, but I honestly could not give you a definitive answer if I really could be.
All right. All right. I'm going to excuse you from this jury. I appreciate your honesty and willing to look inside. It's not a failure. The only failure would be if you didn't tell me the truth, and you obviously have told me the truth. So
Okay.
I'm going to release you from service on this jury. In fact, you're released from all jury service.
Okay.
We're not going to put you on another case. So.
All right.
All right. Deputy will take some paperwork from you, and thank you for your time, both in the questionnaire and here in court today.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, juror 131. 130 is for cause of the state's motion, or on the court's motion. 131. All right, come on up and have a seat, please. Good morning.
Morning.
You are juror 131, correct?
Yes.
All right. A couple things before I turn you over to the attorneys. First of all, I'm going to swear you in because all your answers have to be under oath. So if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
Yes.
All right. A couple things as far as the layout here. We have plexiglass between us and plexiglass in front of us, plexiglass in front of the lawyer's lectern where they'll be asking you questions. Plus, they're a bit of a distance away. Given that whole setup, and I'll continue to wear a mask, I want you to feel comfortable if you want to leave your mask on or to remove it while you're being questioned. So if at any time you just want to take it off, feel free. If you take it off and want to put it back on, feel free. In either case. But whether you have a mask on or off, I would ask that you pull a little closer to the microphone so that we can hear you nice and loud. And I'm sure that'll be fine. So don't worry. I'll adjust you if necessary.
Okay.
First of all, you filled out a questionnaire. Thank you for doing so. It gave us a lot of good information to start with. Is everything on that questionnaire true that you recall?
Yes.
When the lawyers are asking you questions, they will focus you on specific questions. And they'll probably read the question and the answer, not to be confrontational, but just to remind you what your answer was.
Sure.
And I want you to feel comfortable giving a different answer, giving additional information, or even a different opinion, because opinions evolve. You know, since you filled out the questionnaire, you may have thought about other things that you should have put in. Don't worry about it being different from what's in the questionnaire. That's the bottom line, okay?
Okay.
Now, one of the things the questionnaire advised you was not to read any articles, and to avoid the media about this case. But we understand, again, it's been a few months since you filled out the questionnaire. Are there things, because the coverage is so extensive, that you may have been exposed to? A headline, a news blurb, a friend talking about new developments, anything like that, whether this case or related cases, pretrial matters, anything?
I came across the headline of the civil settlement there with the city and the Floyd family.
Okay. And how do you think that would affect your decision in this case?
I don't think it would affect it. I mean, they are separate matters entirely, so I don't think it would come up.
All right, and it won't. I'll just tell you that. It's not a part of this case. It's different case, different legal issues, different parties, different decision-making process.
Sure.
So you think you can put it aside?
Yes.
Question 10 in part 1 of the questionnaire asks if you could be fair and impartial. And you said yes. Does hearing about this settlement move the needle, so to speak? If you're right in the middle on impartial, does it move it one way or the other for you?
No.
All right. Any other information you may have been exposed to since you filled out the questionnaire about this case? Again, pretrial matters, parties, anything?
No.
All right. Excellent. Bottom line on that is you have to decide this case just on what you hear in the courtroom. Put aside everything you've heard, and everybody's heard something about the case and have certain opinions based on what they've heard and seen, and generally. Can you put aside those opinions and what you may have heard outside the courtroom and decide this case just on the law that I give you applied to the evidence that you hear only in this courtroom?
Yes.
All right. Easier question. Did you recognize any of the witnesses on the list that we gave you?
No.
Okay. And we estimate this trial be a month long, starting on Monday. Can you make that work personally and professionally?
Yes. The only thing I would add is that I will be moving out of state at the end of May, so if that timeline changes to the right, it could be a little tricky. But at least for the next 4 weeks, like you said, would be fine.
I think the 4-week estimate is pretty good. It may get longer. As you've seen, there can be delays.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, you're going to have a really cranky judge if we're still in trial at the end of May. So I think it's a safe bet that you should be able to do that without a problem.
Okay.
Even our giving some leeway to both sides presenting their cases, I think we'll be fine if it's the end of May.
Okay.
Other than that, anything that you thought you should bring up before I turn you over to the lawyers?
No, that was the only matter.
Okay. Then as to juror number 131, Mr. Nelson, you may inquire.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for your patience this morning, and thank you for taking the time to fill out your questionnaire. I have a few questions, just kind of generally to get to know you a little better, and then I'm going to ask you some follow-up questions on your responses to the questionnaire.
Okay.
So let's start kind of basic. You and I meet for the first time in some other circumstance, a party, a social event, whatever it may be, and we have our first conversation. What are a few things I'm going to learn about you during that conversation?
You would learn I'm married. I have a young puppy at home. Competitive person, so I follow a lot of different sports, play sports myself. So this past weekend was obviously pretty exciting with the bracket. My teams didn't do well, but it was exciting watching. So I think you would learn those things for sure.
Okay. And I understand you're like an accountant by trade?
Correct.
Okay. Again, we're not trying to name where you work, but pretty busy time of year for you?
Not really. Things have slowed down since all the filings from like 12/31.
Okay. Good. And I think there was an extension on taxes or for personal filing too?
Outside my area of expertise.
Okay. Good. So you'd obviously heard about this case before you received your jury summons, right?
Correct.
And at some point you learned that you were a potential juror in this particular case. What was your initial reaction to that?
A bit of shock, I would say.
Why shock?
Just given the size of Hennepin County, I didn't really think that I would be selected. The probability was fairly low.
Okay. The numbers analysis, right?
Yep.
Did you have concerns for your personal safety, your private, family life, anything of that nature, COVID?
No.
Okay. When you got to the government center this morning and saw kind of its current condition in terms of, military and fencing and things of that nature, how did that make you feel?
It's a bit intimidating, to be honest, but it was fine. Everyone's been really friendly that I've come across.
Okay. Why do you use the word intimidating?
Well, you have multiple barriers there. There were quite a few armed officers and what appeared to be National Guard there at the entrance, so it's quite a bit of show of force.
Okay. Does that have an impact on how you would view this case one way or another?
No.
Okay. When you learned that we were trying to protect people's anonymity, how did that make you feel?
Good.
Okay.
So,
at some point when the judge determines it's safe to do so, your name, if you were a juror on this case, would be released publicly. How do you feel about that?
I understand it's part of the process. I don't like it as much, but I understand it's part of the process.
Okay. Again, anything about that, dislike that would impact your ability to be fair and impartial in this case?
No.
All right. Can you think of a situation, whether it be in your personal or private life or your professional or private life, where you have been called upon to resolve a conflict between two people or a dispute?
Yeah, I mean a couple times probably at work.
Okay. And when you are kind of called upon in that role to do that or to perform that role, what tools, what's your approach to that?
Well, I'd say my approach would be to make sure I'm understanding what the conflict is first and foremost. So asking any sort of probing or clarifying questions to make sure I understand kind of what the root is of the conflict, and then make sure I hear kind of both sides and determine what are the facts from both sides, and then based on my experience and maybe whatever else I can research and opinions I can help advise then to come to a resolution there or compromise, whatever the case may be.
Okay. Obviously, you understand that this involves, kind of large-scale conflict between the state of Minnesota and Mr. Chauvin, but also within the jury room there may be disputes that arise. Would you employ that same process in the jury room?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think it changes the analysis if you are on one side of a dispute or not?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. Well, I'll rephrase it. How's that?
Okay.
rather than being called upon to resolve the dispute, you're a party to the dispute. How do you're disagreeing with someone else.
Yep.
How do you try to resolve that?
Well, I would think I would try to approach it rationally and state the facts and try to stick to it there and then kind of see where that goes and leads to see what dialogue that brings up.
And would you be willing to re-examine your own perspective?
Yes.
At the same time, if you felt it was such a critical issue, would you agree for the purposes of agreement, or would you stand your ground?
Stand my ground.
Okay. How do you approach the analysis of determining whether someone is telling you the truth or not?
I would say kind of you can read a little bit into the person as far as like body language is concerned and eye contact and whatnot, from just like subtle clues. And then I'd say just try to think through it rationally if they're telling the truth or not to try to determine credibility.
Okay. Do you think that two people can observe a situation from literally standing right next to each other and they may perceive it differently?
Yes.
And what factors do you think would affect someone's perception of an event?
I would say, I mean, it depends on a variety of factors, but like what would you call it, like a traumatizing event or something like that? I mean, people always suppress certain things, and even like as you're remembering certain situations, there could be like gaps and whatnot.
Okay. Do you think that a person's, say, training or experience or education may impact how they perceive an event?
Yes.
Right. In your professional life, you may view a financial decision differently than someone else, right?
Could be, yes. I would like to think that it'd be a little more objective there financially if you're sticking more to the numbers, but you could, yes.
Do you think that, again, ultimately, if you have two people seeing the same event and they have different life experiences or different training or, different experiences with trauma, for example, that it doesn't necessarily mean that they're lying about an event? And if so, how do you determine which person's side to give more credence to?
Yes, I would say that could happen. I wouldn't say that they would be lying, but maybe there's, missing pieces or things that they don't remember or didn't see, like you said. I mean, we're all human. We don't perceive and see the event all the same way. And so I would tend to try to determine kind of what's the truth, is just think through it rationally and try to piece it together myself to determine what really happened.
Okay. Can you think of a situation in your life where you were 100% certain of something, only later to learn you were wrong?
More of like a less serious example, but I mean, last week playing tennis, you think the score is one thing, and then your partner or others on the court tell you it's something else. And so just talk through, what were the sequence of events beforehand to lead you to the score line and come to the right answer there.
Okay. I mean, so when I know that's a less significant kind of a example, but sure. I think it's a good example. When something like that happens, I mean, do you readily admit that you're wrong, or do you continue to fight your position?
Just talk through it, I would say, and just try to determine, like in that example, we just talked through it and talked through the sequence of events, and then realized that I was wrong in that case, and changed my opinion. And in this case, moved over to the other side of the court.
Okay. All right. Now, your job as a juror is to listen to all of the evidence, to only the evidence that's presented in court, and at the end of the case, the judge will give you rules of law that would apply. You may read those rules of law, and you may think to yourself, this can't possibly be right, this can't possibly be the law, or I think we need to change this law. Can you apply the law as the judge gives it to you, even if you disagree with it or think it should be changed?
Yes.
No hesitation. I mean, I'm assuming, again, in your professional life, you're used to kind of interpreting law
Correct.
as it applies to financial transactions.
Correct.
All right. Let me just follow up with a few questions on your questionnaire, sir. Again, thank you for taking the time to fill this out. It's helpful. Before I get into it, I want to just make sure there's a video that's referenced, I think, in your answers as well as in some of the questions. And I want to make sure, because several videos have become public. There was a bystander video that went viral and became a news story. There were some body cameras, and there were some store surveillance cameras that have all entered kind of the public dialogue. Which of those videos have you seen?
Just the bystander one. I think it's only one angle.
Okay. And I think you estimated that you just saw that one time.
Mm-hmm.
And
Correct.
by that, did you go and watch the entire video, or did you see just one news clip about it?
I've never seen the whole video. It's only been maybe 30 seconds or so.
Okay. So maybe scrolling through social media, through Facebook, and you see a few seconds of it, or seeing it in the TV news or something like that?
Yep.
Okay. A couple of questions. The first question asks you to kind of just, again, recite what you recall. You remembered that a number of former officers held down George Floyd, while Derek Chauvin in particular knelt on George Floyd's neck. Their restraint lasted for approximately 5 to 10 minutes. Kind of a general recitation of what you remembered, correct?
Correct.
And ultimately, you also remembered that the initial autopsy said George Floyd did not die from suffocation, but a different autopsy came to a different conclusion. Again, the question being is, you may or may not hear evidence about different medical opinions. Again, based on your role as a juror, can you set aside everything that you may have heard beforehand and focus exclusively on the evidence as it's presented in court?
Yes.
You were asked about your impression of the defendant, Mr. Chauvin, and you indicated that you had a somewhat negative impression. You wrote, "While I do not have all the facts of the case, it seems like it would not have taken 4 officers to respond to a call regarding a counterfeit bill, and that the restraint of George Floyd for 5 to 10 minutes may have been unnecessary." So I guess the question is have you formed an opinion about the use of force in this case? As to whether it was unreasonable, reasonable, based on what you've seen?
Well, what I put in there was accurate. I mean, I think the duration was a bit, like I said, unnecessary.
Okay.
For 5 to 10 minutes, whatever the exact number is.
So it's another way of saying you formed an opinion that it was an unnecessary use of force, right?
For that duration of time.
Okay. Focusing specifically on the duration.
Correct.
All right. Now, if you were a juror in this case, you understand that police practices, police policies, that may be an issue in this case. Do you understand that?
Yes.
And you're not a police officer, right?
No.
Okay. Have you ever received any specific training about how particularly the Minneapolis Police Department trains their police officers?
No.
Would you be able to set aside your opinion as to the duration of the restraint, listen to the evidence as it's presented in court, and formulate a verdict based on the evidence?
Yes.
You were asked about your opinion of Mr. Floyd, and you wrote that you had a neutral impression, and you wrote, "I do not know a lot about him apart from what was written on the previous page, that he was a middle-aged African-American with kids living in the Twin Cities." So you have no impression or have formed no opinion as to Mr. Floyd.
Correct.
Good. You were asked about whether you've ever talked about Mr. Floyd's death with your family, friends, or coworkers, or discussed it online, for example, on social media? And you checked the box yes. So I'm going to parse this out a little bit. Have you ever shared or expressed an opinion online through social media?
No.
But you wrote, at work, we discussed what we can do both personally and as an organization to help end racism, and I voiced a desire to educate myself on the subject, starting with reading a book. I have not expressed any opinions on George Floyd's death on social media. Sorry, I guess I missed that there the first time. So obviously you recognize this started a dialogue amongst people, right?
Yes.
And again, your opinions, the opinions you may have formed, or your organization's kind of discussions, get set all of that aside. Can you do that?
Yes.
Will you do that?
Yes.
All right. You were asked whether or not the community has been negatively or positively affected by any of the protests that have taken place in the Twin Cities since Mr. Floyd's death, and you wrote negatively affected. Can you explain why?
Well, like we just talked about, the dialogue at the beginning to start talking about racism and other topics, I think is great. And then when the dialogue started shifting towards kind of the looting aspect of various targets and burning of the precincts and whatnot, I think kind of the message gets lost, and so I would say kind of shifted more towards negatively impacting the community and small business owners and whatnot.
On one of the pages, there were a variety of statements, kind of broad, generalized statements, and you were asked to rank your opinion, I guess, on some of those statements. Do you recall that exercise?
Yes.
And I know you may not remember every single thing that was asked or what you circled, so I just want to talk about a couple of them with you. The statement reads, blacks and other minorities do not receive equal treatment as whites in the criminal justice system, and you somewhat agreed with that. What do you base your opinion on regarding the treatment of blacks and other minorities within the criminal justice system?
Statistically speaking, what I've read is that minorities are incarcerated more frequently and for longer sentences for similar crimes as their white peers. So
Okay.
I couldn't necessarily pinpoint why that would be, but it seems to point to that they're not quite treated equally.
Okay. So you've read some studies or articles focusing on the statistical, again, mathematical analysis.
Correct.
Okay. The statement reads, police in my community make me feel safe, and you strongly agreed with that.
Yes.
And you strongly disagreed with the notion of defunding, the Minneapolis Police Department.
Yes.
Do you have personal experiences that shape why you think that police are there to keep you safe?
Not necessarily personal experiences, but I believe the police force is a necessary and integral part of our society.
Okay. With respect to one statement, you asked, or you were asked this: Minneapolis police officers are more likely to respond with force when confronting black suspects than with dealing with white suspects, and you somewhat agreed with that. What did you base your opinion on there?
Maybe not necessarily to Minneapolis. I haven't read as many cases, but I mean, you've kind of seen what happens in Atlanta and other places around the United States that seems to suggest that would be the case.
Okay. So your response would not just be limited to the Minneapolis Police Department.
Correct.
And I guess following up on that is, you have a respect for law enforcement, and this case obviously involves the Minneapolis Police Department. Would you accept a police officer's testimony with greater credibility than a citizen's or bystander or an observer, simply by virtue of the fact that they are police officers?
I think it would depend on the topic. So if we talked about earlier, like police training or something like that, where there would be more of a subject matter expert in that case, I would put more credibility to them. But just because they wear a badge, not necessarily.
All right. So if a police officer and a citizen are observing the same event, right, taking it out of an area of expertise, would you automatically assign greater credibility to the police officer by virtue of the fact he's a police officer?
No.
You were asked a series of questions about your opinion on Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter. You had a somewhat favorable impression of Black Lives Matter and a neutral opinion as to, or impression as to, Blue Lives Matter. You wrote, I support the black community's fight against racism and inequality, but have not always agreed with the tactics employed by the Black Lives Matter movement. Is there something in specific, like do you assign Black Lives Matter responsibility for the protests, or I should say the riots that occurred after Mr. Floyd's death?
Maybe a certain degree. I know that the frustration, has spilled over into certain areas, so I can understand kind of how it boiled to that point, but yeah, to a certain extent.
And wrote, with respect to Blue Lives Matter, you wrote, I support our police departments who provide a valuable and dangerous services to our community. However, I think the Blue Lives Matter movement has not done enough to enhance the conversation on equality and other issues such as gun control. Right. So I think again, you respect law enforcement, is that fair to say?
Yes.
But you don't assign them more believability or weight simply by virtue of the fact that they're police?
Yes.
You have a relative through marriage who is a physician, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you were to be hearing medical opinions or medical evidence in this case, would you call that relative and ask for his or her opinion?
No.
Lastly, you were asked, do you want to serve as a juror in this case? And you wrote, not sure. You wrote, I am willing to perform my civic duty as a juror in this case. If selected, I do not have a preference. So it's,
Right.
can you strike me as a fairly analytical person. Is that the same analysis or that same analytical kind of tendency that you would apply if you were a juror in this case?
Yes.
And again, focusing only on the evidence as it's presented in court.
Yes.
You can do that.
Yes.
And you would do that.
Yes.
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
So what kind of puppy?
He's a Bernese Mountain Dog, almost 6 months old now.
Okay. Now, you've described yourself as being an analytical person. You're an accountant, correct?
Yeah.
Make rational decisions.
Try to.
So explain the rationale of getting a puppy.
My wife and I always wanted one, so we don't have kids, but we wanted to have a dog first, and so felt like the right time. You know, we're working from home for the foreseeable future anyway, so could create some, you know, separation anxiety problems down the road, but felt like the right time to do it.
As you know, you're going to have to feed it and take care of it, and it's going to do absolutely nothing for you, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. You also mentioned that you're into sports and you're currently watching some basketball.
Yes.
You also watch football?
Yes.
You still watch football? Did you watch the Super Bowl last year?
Yes.
Sometimes during sporting events, certain players will make political statements. For example, take a knee during the national anthem. Have you seen that?
Yes.
Describe how you feel about that when you see someone do that.
I would prefer if someone would express their beliefs in a different manner, but I understand kind of what they're trying to do and raise the dialogue on certain issues.
Mm-hmm. And how so? How would you prefer that they express their opinion?
In a different manner, not during the national anthem?
What is it about the playing of the national anthem that you wish they would just kind of leave that alone? What is it about that?
I think it's more of a respect for those that have come before us and kind of the system that we have here in the United States, and feel a great sense of pride in being a United States citizen. And so see people not stand up and remove their hats and be courteous to it. I would just prefer a different method for those to kind of get their message across.
You indicated that you read a book after a company-sponsored dialogue about racism. Is that right? What book was it that you read?
I don't remember offhand, to be honest.
Did you finish the book?
Got most of the way through.
Okay. Do you remember any general impressions or anything that you got out of reading this book?
It's been a while. Nothing's jumping out at me at the moment.
You indicated that you believe that the protests kind of devolved into rioting and that had a negative impact on the community. Is that right?
Yes.
And you somewhat ascribe the organization Black Lives Matter to the rioting and looting.
What was the question?
You believe that Black Lives Matter is responsible for the rioting and looting?
I don't know if I would necessarily describe it as responsible.
Okay. How would you describe it?
Like I said, kind of the frustration kind of boiled over to do more of the rioting. So I wouldn't say that the Black Lives Matter movement was responsible, but perhaps was a contributing factor.
Mm-hmm. And just based on your own observations, would you be able to pick out any group more than any other group that could have been responsible for rioting and looting that took place?
Are you asking for the specific groups I think would be responsible?
Yes, or if you think any other groups aside from Black Lives Matter could be responsible.
Well, I would say maybe an unpopular opinion, but police force, I don't know if necessarily did also a great job at de-escalating some of the situations.
And you use that term de-escalating. What do you mean by that? What do you think the police could have done better, I guess, in what followed the initial protests and then when there was rioting and looting?
Not quite sure exactly what they could have done, but perhaps just something different would have been a more prudent approach.
You strongly disagree with the concept of defunding the Minneapolis Police Department. Can you just share with me a little bit about your opinions on that concept, what it means to you, and why you disagree with it?
Yeah. Well, like I said earlier, I think they provide a valuable service to our society. And so I don't agree with defunding. I think if we want to have a dialogue about perhaps shifting some of the different funds to different areas, I think that would be like a good conversation to have. But as far as like actually cutting funding for certain programs within the police department, I don't agree with that.
So would it be fair to say that you believe that where other programs maybe should receive additional funding, you would not support cutting funding from the police because you believe that they're essential?
Yep.
And then on the issue of your opinion of Blue Lives Matter, you said that you think that Blue Lives Matter movement has not done enough to change the conversation on equality and other issues such as gun control. Can you explain what you would like to have seen Blue Lives Matter do about conversations of equality or gun control?
Well, I think you often see that there are like two different spectrums. You have like the Blue Lives Matter clashing against kind of the Black Lives Matter. And so I think that, both sides, instead of being more confrontational, I guess you could say, would have more like open dialogue about what they could really do to bridge some of the like frustration and things that are happening in our society.
Take more of a practical approach as opposed to an advocacy approach. Would that be fair?
Yep.
And then in terms of your attitudes toward the criminal justice system, you indicated you believe there's room for improvement, particularly in corrections, and that there should be more closely aligning punishment with the crime, better support for proper rehabilitation. Can you tell me a little bit about how you've come to those conclusions?
Yeah, and this is more kind of what I've read from statistics, is that, once some folks are incarcerated, I don't remember the number, but it's higher than others that they will return to prison. And so I think there's some sort of gap there in the rehabilitation then to our society. And so I don't necessarily know what the right answer is to improve that, but that would be kind of an area where I think there could be improvement.
One moment, Your Honor. We'll pass for cause, Your Honor.
Juror 131, you will be on our jury. We'll have your report Monday at 9 a.m. You're also going to get probably a letter or other communications from the jury office on logistics and specifics regarding that. So the deputy will take something from you, but otherwise keep that letter that got you in here today and bring it on Monday. All right? Any questions?
What time do you say?
9 a.m.
Okay.
So that's when we're going to start. So, but you'll get a letter with more logistics from the jury office,
okay,
as far as where and how to report and that type of thing. All right?
Okay.
All right. Thank you. You may go with the deputy.
Thank you.
All right. We have 15. Obviously, just to reiterate, 14 will be seated. That's all we have room for. We could seat 15 if we had room, but 15th juror, as the last chosen, will be excused on Monday of the other 14. The whole point of this 15th juror was to make sure that we have 14 people show up on Monday. Nevertheless, I'm still not going to release the jury pool until the jury is sworn, on the off chance that we still have to pick some alternates. But I'm hopeful that since it's only a few days, that we'll have 14 people show up, and those 14 will be seated and sworn, and we'll proceed with opening statements at that time. Anything else for the record from the state?
No, thank you, Your Honor. No, Your Honor.
All right, we are in recess until Monday, March 29th at 9 a.m. Thank you.